Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to another round of .NET Foundation Board candidate interviews. My name is Alyssa Nicoll, and I will be running the show today and interviewing our four lovely guests. And before I do that, just a little bit about me. I am an Angular developer advocate for Kendo UI at Progress, and I'm very, very excited to be here today and get to do these interviews. So without further ado, I'm going to welcome on our first guest of the day, Jamie Howarth.
Hi there, Alyssa. How's it going?
Hey, Jamie. Okay, did I say your last name right?
Yes, you did.
Okay.
You did. You're one of the few people I've met that manages to get it right first time. It's
So,
basically Howard, but without the th.
gotcha. So,
Yeah,
can you tell us about basically a little bit about yourself and why you're running for the .NET Foundation Board?
I sure can. So I have been writing C# and .NET for 12 years now, and heavily involved in the open source community around .NET for 10 years or so. And that includes contributions to NuGet, Automapper, Refit, and the Umbraco CMS. I have, since 2017, I've also been an ASP Insider, and I'm also a mentor for Code First Girls, which is a non-profit initiative in the UK to get young women aged 11 to 18 into programming.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I keep pretty busy. So, and on the side of that, I've during COVID-19, and I'd say for the last 9 months or so, I've also been working with a non-profit called the Joe Cox Foundation, which was set up in the UK in 2016 to honour the memory of a late legislator, Joe Cox, who was unfortunately killed in 2016 during a political campaign. And during COVID-19, I've also been the sort of de facto CTO for an initiative called helpyourhighstreet.org, which is a directory of small businesses that are selling gift cards to help them with their cash flow during COVID-19, because it's an important line of credit that small businesses have, because obviously they're still incurring rent and staffing costs and all the rest. And while the government's done, a lot around that, it's nice to connect consumers with their favorite businesses to support them.
So, before we jump to the next .NET question, I just want to ask, anytime I hear someone who's just doing everything and like I always have to find out, like, what is your secret?
I mean, when it comes to working with the foundation, I mean, I basically do a few updates for them. They've got a WordPress site and a site that's built on a platform called Nation Builder. So they have sort of very few sort of regular demands. So I may be checking on them once or twice a month to do updates, security patches. I'm supposed to be doing a session with them at some point, obviously when COVID-19 is over, to discuss digital security for all their volunteers and their staff.
Nice.
So things like two-factor authentication, bits and pieces like that. The Help Your High Street initiative I sort of came into it, I'd say round about late March, but there's actually a team of 8 developers in there. So, and we set up a brilliant process in GitLab, because previously the developers using it were just emailing around zip files. So the guy who set it up, a guy called Kanishka, he's an MBA grad from Stanford, and he basically sort of didn't really know how to do all the technical process. So I gave them GitLab, put Cloudflare in front of it. We're using GitLab Pages. So
Nice.
it's really super simple. But it's all really easy and reusable, and people are using VS Code or just even Notepad just to make their own little changes. And yeah, so we've got about 8 developers spanning, I think it's about 5 or 6 different time zones. So all I did was simply set up a trust and transparency process that says, right, if you want to make any changes, then send in a pull request. 2 other people have to review it. As long as they review it, it goes live. So it's all trust and and the transparency of the process. It's very agile, but it means that anybody can get on and contribute. And my key involvement was actually setting that process up, so then I could be hands off in terms of the technical stuff. So
No, that's really nice. And it's so much better than sending around zip files.
So much better. Yes,
So
absolutely.
while we're on, I'm going to jump to this question. While we're on contributions, are there any other contributions you'd like to highlight to the .NET Foundation?
Yes, I have been working with the Outreach Committee. As part of being a mentor for Code First Girls, I have been working on a C# syllabus because currently they've got a Python one, an SQL one, and a web development one. And I'm the mentor in the web development track. And I've been sort of developing a C# syllabus to use with Raspberry Pis for all the students for Code First Girls. And I've been working with the Outreach Committee and taking minutes when the Outreach Committee has been meeting every month in the foundation already, and liaising with a few other developers who have also made their own or started their own C# syllabuses, or syllabi, sorry. And yeah, so I've already been heavily involved with the foundation, taking notes, engaging in outreach, and that's sort of what I want to bring to the foundation is more of that, basically, and sort of pushing when kids and young people do start programming. There's tons of stuff out there, like there's Scratch and there's Python tutorials and even there's PHP tutorials, but there's not that much around C#, and I really want to see the foundation sort of push that as a thing, basically,
as an initiative. That's really
absolutely
neat.
Yeah, because ultimately representation in STEM is only going to start when we actually get people involved from young ages.
No,
and so improving STEM representation, especially for women and minorities, is hugely important. And we need to, in the words of, I forget who said it, but catch them young, basically. And we need to start with K-12 initiatives to get that. And that's what I really want to see the foundation do. And that's what I would really want to push for.
What is the age you'd mentioned with was it the coding for women or the coding for girls?
Code First Girls, yeah.
Yes.
It's 11 to 18 years old. So it's high school, basically, in the UK. So yeah, obviously all the courses right now are virtual only. But we're hoping to resume in person. They basically use university facilities, and there's 2 world-class universities a couple of miles up the road from me. So we'll be using those when COVID-19 is over to actually host weekly classroom sessions.
It's such a weird time right now, but I have to give you props for still being a part of the community and like getting in there even amongst the weirdness. So
yeah, the other thing I do as well is I'm there's a monthly meetup in Canary Wharf which I help to organise the speakers for, called CanaryWharf.net Meetup, and obviously we've moved to virtual during that as well. So I host those once a month as well, in the second Tuesday of every month.
Very cool. I wanted to ask you before, we have like a minute and a half before we wrap up our session today, but what experience do you have that lends itself to being on the board?
Well, as I mentioned, volunteering and working with nonprofits for the last year or so has given me a lot of experience with, obviously, the sort of transparency and trust accountability that's necessary when working with groups of volunteers. As I say, I've already been heavily involved in the last 6 months with the foundation and its outreach group, including, as I say, minuting and actually taking notes of what people are doing, how we're doing proposal processes. I think I would bring that experience to being a board member. I think that would be what I can bring to the table in terms of my skills and experience.
Very wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Jamie, for your time. We have a little bit, I think about a minute left. If there's anything else that you wanted to share or talk about during your interview.
Yeah, well, I'm currently working on a couple of nice little open source projects. One of them is an online shop module for Umbraco, which I'm breathing some sort of new life into for one of my startups, which is called Michello, which is quite good fun. And if anyone wants to go check that out, then it's github.com/JamieHoward0/Michello. And I'm also working, there's a really nice little tool called Refit, which I really like. It's a way of generating classes around interfaces just for doing REST style. So you can do get, post, put, delete, all that kind of stuff. And I've been contributing to that for a while. I'm building a few kind of sort of official client libraries around it. But my big one I'm working on at the moment is the Twitter one, because Twitter client libraries for .NET Core aren't really quite there yet. So I'm hoping that I can get this one wrapped up and released hopefully in the next couple of weeks or so.
Wow, goodness gracious. Is there anything you're not doing?
Sleeping much.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Jamie, for
My
coming
pleasure.
on and doing the interview, and best of luck to you. So.
Thank you very much, Alyssa. It was a pleasure.
All right. Next up for .NET Foundation Board interviews, we have, let's see who is in our roster, Joseph Guadagno, and hopefully I said that right. So welcome to the stage, Joseph.
Thank you. Most people call me Joe unless I'm in trouble. So,
Joe, it is then. And did I say, how do you pronounce your last name? Just so
yep,
we have.
Guadagno, you got it right. Most
Awesome.
people that know me don't call me that. They just call me Joe G because it's too darn hard to pronounce.
Well, welcome to the interview process, Joe. Can you tell us a little bit about why you're running?
So, for me, there are quite a few reasons. I actually ran for the board last yearish, quote unquote, when it started, mostly for education. I think it's one of the things we're lacking nowadays, especially in technology, is being able to educate people. We don't have a great way of doing that. Most people, especially myself, are self taught. There are boot camps out there that can help with most of the way, but they don't really get you all there. They teach you some of the overall basics. So I think one of the things Foundation can do a lot is to help with that. I mean, we're starting to do that with helping with user groups and other community events, but I think it's important to get more grassroots efforts. One of the things I help out in the US is with Congress at the part of the congressional challenge where we help high school students get into software development and programming to try and get them more interested and excited about it. Another great thing is I think I was listening to an interview earlier. It was either Sean or Bill that said most of software developers now are middle-aged white men like myself who ironically wear cargo pants. Luckily today I'm not wearing cargo pants, but I'm wearing cargo shorts. Uh, and we need to change that. So I work for a company based out of Detroit, Quicken Loans. They're pretty large in the mortgage industry, and we are helping to try and cut the digital divide. Detroit is one of the areas that is really hurting for getting people in touch with technology. So, and I think that's something that the .NET Foundation can really help with too, is getting out there, not just with open source products, but getting out with education. So that's one of the primary reasons why.
Very cool. So, sum up education and diversity, the two pillars, the two things that you'd like to, I guess, initialize. So, another thing that I'd like to get into is what is your background with the .NET Foundation?
So I'm on one of the committees, but in all honesty, I haven't dedicated a lot of time to it. For the most part, I spent a good chunk of time when I was in Bulgaria with John Galloway talking about .NET Foundation when he was really starting to think about making it public and starting to talk about what it can do, what it can't do. So him and I spent hours talking about it there and in Vegas about different things to do, only because I have a lot of experience with boards. I used to be the president of INETA, the International .NET Association, which was created when Microsoft .NET Framework first came out as a way to educate other people and companies around what .NET is. So I talked to them a lot about our lessons learned over time. It was around for good 14 or 15 years before we decided to dismantle it.
So I think my next question kind of leads into that. Could you talk a bit about the experience that you gained from that would like lend itself to being on the board?
So I think I touched on it a little bit. The biggest thing is uh, learning what kind of worked and what didn't work back then. A lot of what didn't work is it seemed like it was in a vacuum. A lot of the things we did were not as open. We thought they were open, but obviously, it's perception is, is
Right.
reality, right? Uh, so being a lot more open, which I think is a big goal of the foundation now, which is one of the reasons why we're doing these phone interviews or Teams interviews / StreamYard / YouTube interviews, is
Right.
to try and increase some of that transparency and to help out because not a lot of people know, what's going on behind the scenes.
Absolutely. So what are some of your contributions to the .NET Foundation?
So in .NET in general, I've done a lot of documentation updates, mostly in Azure. A lot of the things I am big on are training and trying to teach people. So when I find documentation that's wrong, I try and fix it. I started doing streaming about a month and a half ago. Actually, I think it's been 2 months now.
How's that going? Has it been
It's
positive?
going well, I think, but I'm not hitting affiliate status yet. I average 1 or 2 viewers a day, but it's not about the viewers. It's more about the reach. I publish all the videos on YouTube trying to get it, but it's mostly about education. We started off with a really basic app and just keep building upon it. So it's where I want to kind of take things to educate people. And I already forgot the question. I think I said.
Oh, we were just talking about background in .NET and contributions to the .NET community.
The other contributions is I have, I think, 25 different open source projects on GitHub, mostly around Azure, but the latest has been this context application I'm building to try and show the mechanics of an application from the very beginning. Nowhere near the lines of like an auto mapper or something like that, but little small bits, the things that edge cases that people kind of need, or things that bother me at least.
No, that's great. It's always best to, I don't remember the saying, but basically tackle a problem that you have, because you'd be surprised how many other people have it. So,
Yep.
So we've hit on your background with the .NET Foundation and contributions that you've had to the .NET community, also why you're running. Let's see. And then I think we've also touched on what experience you have that lends itself to the board and being on the board. Is there any other topic around the community or the .NET Foundation that you'd like to talk about while we are still on your interview?
I think the biggest is, like I said, the education, trying to take some of the lessons learned that I've had with prior board experience and helping others get that same benefit out of it. I think we really need to, from a overall society, is increase our number of software developers, engineers, just people in technology in general. I mean, if you just look at it 6 months ago or 5 months ago, whatever, we're starting to lose track of days now. Being stay at home, we did not have, if it wasn't for technology, we wouldn't have that. We're moving more and more into digital, so we need to find better ways to get our youth excited about it, and not just to build games or post on Instagram or TikTok, but build the software that does all that and more.
Absolutely. Well, I think we have a little bit more time. We have a question from the chat as well, so that'll be coming in soon. You said that you're US based, though?
Yes, I live in Phoenix, Arizona, where it's about 140 billion degrees right now. Or closer to like 42-ish, 43-ish Celsius.
I'm sorry. Anytime I visit Arizona, I'm just infatuated. I know it's the desert, but it's beautiful. It's seriously beautiful out there.
It's lovely here. I mean, when my wife and I looked at moving here, we thought, wherever you live, at least in the U.S., there's some form of weather you have to deal with. What can we tolerate the most? And the heat for 2 or 3 months you can tolerate. We originally from New York, so it's just a whole nother mix of weather.
Yes. So the question from the chat is from, I think, Matt's Coke. Could you ask every person what their number one focus for the foundation is?
I think some of that was clear, but starting to work on an education platform for others. I think Mitchell touched on it a little bit, some standards like, hey, if you want to get started with an open source product, here are certain things you can do. Here are certain guidelines to follow. Here are things that can help you be successful. And I think that's what a lot of people could use, at least just for open source. I mean, my things are not that big from an open source standpoint, and they probably could be bigger. And there's lots of lessons to be learned in a shared community as to, what we did to make our product, that much more impactful. So I think starting a lot of that would work.
Very, very nice. Thank you so much for coming on. Joe, I hope you have a marvelous day and best of luck to you.
Thank you. It was
Thank
a pleasure.
You. All right, we are ready for our third interview. Right now, we are going to welcome to the stage Rodney Littles.
Alyssa, thank you very much.
Hey,
How you doing?
I'm doing marvelous. How are you doing?
Wonderful, wonderful. It's a Jury Friday here in Houston, Texas.
I heard it was storming a bit. So if we hear some thunder,
Yeah.
that's what's going on.
yeah. I thought it was the trash folks, and it turns out that there's a thunderstorm going on. So.
So Rodney, can you tell us a little bit about why you're running for the .NET Foundation board?
So if you look at the .NET Foundation's About page, on there it says what we do. And the things that they talk about are things that are kind of near and dear to my heart. I think that the .NET Foundation is doing a lot of good. I think that if we focused and targeted certain other areas, we may be able to help bridge some of the gaps in the .NET's open source community. Some of the things that they talk about is promoting the broad spectrum of softwares available, evangelizing the benefits of the .NET platform, promoting the open source model, right? And that's really a big one for me, because I think that while the foundation has great intentions, I think that we as a community need to do a better job of promoting the open source model and really getting back in touch with Microsoft and letting them know that the way that they're approaching open source is different than the way other languages are approaching it. And we should take some ideas from that so that we can build a healthier open source community. So really why I'm running is really to try and bridge the gaps between open source maintainers and consumers. There are people that are producing open source packages that are giving their spare time, their nights, their weekends to provide a leg up, or standing on the backs of giants for other developers. And a lot of, we see it even in the public .NET forums. Like there was one on Andy Framework Core not too long ago where somebody was very upset, didn't want to help provide any reproduction steps so that the team could help them fix the issue. And it's just like, right, how can we get the consumers to understand that these people are giving their time, and while our time is valuable and we want to help, but if you can help us help you, then we can all get there together.
Yeah. So it sounds like a lot of open source issues and communication issues that you'd like to start tackling.
Yes, that is the primary goal of why I'm running for a board position, is to help bridge that gap. Like I said, I've been open source maintainer for the past several years for a project that's in the .NET Foundation, and I see some areas for improvement.
Okay, very neat. So what is your background with the .NET Foundation?
Oh, so I've been a maintainer of the Reactive UI MVVM framework for the past 2 years. I did not write the open source project. I actually came in, so my case is somewhat unique. The maintainer that was maintaining was ready to step down and had somebody not stepped in, the project would have ended up being dead because he was going through some life changes and he needed somebody to step in. He reached out to me. We had some conversations, and I was able to help with the succession of a .NET Foundation open source project. So I was able to go from a consumer to a maintainer and help understand. Oh, did we lose me?
Nope, you're still good. I was double checking.
Okay, so I was able to go from a consumer to a maintainer, and I really got a chance to see what that looks like from somebody who's never really done open source on that level to now being responsible for curating issues, responding to people's feedback, helping people in Slack channels, helping people with Stack Overflow posts, things that I was never planning to do, but there was a need that needed to be filled. And had I not stepped in, had Glenn, the other maintainer, not stepped in, the project could have died. And that's a .NET Foundation project that would have fallen by the wayside, like some of the other ones that I'm seeing recently. So my work with the foundation has been primarily as a maintainer of a project that is in the foundation. We were one of the pilot groups for the foundation. So we've been in it a while. We've had a chance to watch the foundation mature. And that's kind of, again, why I'm here, is because while the foundation has provided us a lot of good things, and I will not say that they haven't, I think that there are opportunities for us to do more. And I really want to tackle those opportunities.
Very nice. So the question was specifically about your background with .NET, but I know we got into contributions. So I just wanted to make sure before we moved on that you didn't have any more contributions that you wanted to mention with the .NET Foundation or community.
So I have a couple of small libraries. I've got a group where I push packages on top of MVVM. The majority of my contributions are these days are maintaining reactive UI. I've contributed to Cake and some other .NET Foundation projects along the way. I've anytime I get a chance to help somebody that's in the foundation, that I can help, I do my best to do so. And even people that aren't in the foundation, Alan Ritchie has been active on Twitter recently as a Xamarin developer. He's written a library that helps a lot of Xamarin concerns around location services, notification services, GPS readings, and he's just asking for help. So I sent some documentation. Now, is that a really big thing? Did I change the face of the project? No, but every little bit helps. And I think that's the big thing that we don't see as consumers, is that every single bit helps. You call out that my documentation is missing a punctuation, that helps. If you submit a pull request to the website saying that this is a dead link, that helps. All of these things help me as the maintainer focus on other things that may add bigger value for the overall community. So my contributions are really around .NET open source. The libraries that I consume, I do my best to try and give back.
Very nice. So what experience do you have that would lend itself well to being on the board?
I've been a member of several organizations throughout my life cycle. So I've held president positions in organizations. I've not been on a board this big, and I'll candidly say that this is probably the biggest opportunity for me to really get in and give back. But being a Xamarin developer, Xamarin is moving into the core framework, right? We are now with Maui, we are on the road to Maui, right? And I make this joke because, Maui's the actual destination, right? So on the road to Maui, one of the things, I'm a horrible.
No, I love it. I love it.
Well, I make bad jokes all the time. On the road to Maui, my hope is that we can shore up some of the things in the Xamarin framework. I've been a Xamarin developer for the past 4 or 5 years. I have seen Xamarin Forms mature and grow, and now we are finally becoming a first-class citizen in .NET. Like, yay, we're a first-class citizen. So what does that mean, right? And is there anybody on the board that cares about the Xamarin community, which has honestly been a redheaded stepchild of the .NET community, because everything you see is Azure and web. And no one really talks about this cross-platform mobile experience that .NET is providing. So I think that as someone that consumes .NET, I've been consuming the .NET framework since 2001. Yeah, I've been consuming the .NET framework for 15 years. I've been active in the open source community for the past 5. I've been a Xamarin developer for the past 5. I think that the experience that I have with working with organizations, as well as the fact that I'm in a kind of a niche position where I kind of speak for people that don't have a voice right now being in the Xamarin community. I think that that's really where my value add is, because like now that we're moving on this road towards Maui, I'm hoping that we as the Xamarin community can kind of affect how that looks in the .NET framework.
Very nice. So would you say that or maybe something else is your number one focus for the foundation?
Okay, so that's a loaded question, yeah, because I have like a couple of quote unquote number ones, but
we can do top three. We're we're flexible here.
Okay, so on my campaign page, one of the things I talked about, I took a slightly different approach. One of the things that I said, what do I want, right? Because I grew up in politics. I really don't like politics. I can't stand when politicians stand up and say, I'm going to do all of these things. Because the reality is I may get it onto the board and find out that I can't do any of those things, and that I've made all of these promises and I basically lied to people. So I won't tell you what I'm going to do. I tell you what I want to see from the foundation. And if I'm on the board, I'm going to be working towards making those things happen. So those things include kind of like an open source relief effort. There's a lot of, like I said, there's a lot of projects that are recently I was about to start a project, a little mini project on the side for myself. I was like, I haven't used Nancy in a while. Let me go and use Nancy, and find out Nancy is no longer supported. That's a .NET Foundation open source project that no one, like, it wasn't even like publicized that's being deprecated. And it's just like, I, as somebody in the foundation, didn't know. I, as a maintainer of another project in the foundation, didn't know. I didn't know until I went to the README and found it. So, some type of open source relief where we create like grooming for people like myself. Like I said, I came in green. I had no experience, and and Glenn has been doing a great job of grooming me. Hey, Rodney, that issue that you responded to, you might want to tone it down. Hey, Rodney, that issue that you responded to, you could have answered it better this way. So, simple things like grooming people to take over those technologies so that they don't die, I think is something that the .NET Foundation needs to be responsible for. Another one is going to be like an open source sponsorship program. While I see that GitHub has recently added sponsorships, and that's great. Now we've got developers sponsoring other developers. The reality of it is that these developers work for companies, and these companies are the ones that are benefiting from these projects, not just the developers, right? Like, we make these tools, and the developers are using those tools to help their company advancement. So instead of just developers contributing via GitHub sponsorships, maybe we should look at some level of corporate sponsorship, so that we're now allowing corporations to give back, because a lot of corporations don't allow for their developers to contribute to open source with pull requests. They actually have legal concerns around that. Right. So I even if it's not money, even if we work with the legal departments to try and change that, because really what those legal departments are doing is taking away our contributors. Right? Mm-hmm. Because they're .NET developers. They're already .NET developers developing .NET in a production environment. And they're consuming our products, and they're finding our bugs, but they can't contribute back with their time. Mm-hmm. That's something that I think that the .NET Foundation should try. I'm not saying that it's going to do it, but it should try and address.
It'd be a big door to open if it was possible. That'd be neat.
I know it's a big door, and I know these things are big asks, and that's why I'm not saying that I'm going to do them. These are things that I want. I, as a person in the community, I, as a .NET Foundation member, I, as an open source maintainer, I want these things. So if you're aligned with that, then maybe give me a vote. But otherwise, I would say that it's something that we need to address, because we're going to start to reduce our pool of developers. We're trying to bring new developers in. We're trying to make sure that these projects stay maintained, and that becomes very, very tragic when Nancy, which was a great alternative to Web API, is just no longer supported. And then growing the community. Again, I work on a MVVM framework, and MVVM is the de facto standard right now for how applications are built in the .NET framework. So I'm constantly helping people with their first MVVM questions. Hey, I'm new to .NET. I'm new to MVVM. How do I do these things? So even though they're only coming to my Slack channel for our group, I'm at least getting a touch point with new developers to get them on board. And I think that that's really what we need to do is we need to open up the ability to educate and help with open source documentation so that we can make sure that, because like there's no reason why some of these open source projects can't leverage the same technologies and tools that Microsoft is using to generate their brand new Microsoft Docs, which, by the way, is 10 times better than MSDN ever was. So, why aren't those tools available to everyone to make the MVVM experience, the onboarding experience, better for people who don't know?
Well, thank you so much, Rodney. Lots of really neat initiatives, and I wish you the best of luck. Thank you for coming on and interviewing.
Thank you for having me. Bye.
All right. The last candidate that we'll be interviewing today is Javier Lozano. Welcome to the stage, Javier.
Hey, thank you for having so much. It's great to be here for the second time. So my apologies for crashing earlier.
Oh no, we weren't live yet.
Oh,
so
perfect.
No crashing.
Sorry, Jamie, for crashing the interview.
No, that's the neat thing about StreamYard. We have a backstage, so even if you join early, we didn't plop you on early. So no worries.
I was gonna blame it on Jeff Fritz because he sent me an email and was like, "Oh my gosh, I'm late. I gotta click on the link."
It's always good to blame Jeff.
There's a full Pavlonian response. That's what it was, based on links.
So Javier, tell us why you're running for the .NET Foundation.
Great. Yeah. So first of all, my name is Javier Lozano, and the reason why I'm running for the .NET Foundation is because I think we could do better from advocacy and marketing of the current .NET projects that we have. So what I mean by that is that, sure, we have a GitHub repo that has documentation. We have a wiki that may have documentation, but that's literally of how. Here's how you turn the widget, turn it on, turn it off. Here's how you do it, but not necessarily why I should use it, right? And there is some resource when it comes to time from being an open source developer, which I have been in the past, and that you only have either I work on feature X, or I answer issue, or I come up with documentation, or I do a tutorial, or I do all these different things, and it just gets difficult. So if we were to provide a way for not necessarily the actual author, but other people who are trying to work their way into the project to say, hey, let's do a 20-minute or 30-minute, here's how you do XYZ and why it's good to do XYZ. Right. So it's more of a marketing thing. We have really smart people contributing to these projects. So we don't need more bits. We need more whats and hows, right? Yeah. To be able to do those things. And I think up to this point, I view that the .NET Foundation is different cycles, right? So we've gone through where we have the first board that was essentially last year and a half, where the board has been working on this, and they create a good foundation for what we have right now. So now let's try to move things forward, right? Let's try another layer. Not saying that they did anything, but it's just like, okay, now let's build upon that and upon that and upon that, because that's essentially what the foundation is. It's supposed to outlast any member, right, as you go along. So I have different ideas that we could try, and all of these are based on some of the work that we've done with a project that I run with the foundation, the .NET Conf, which is a virtual conference for .NET. So that's
very neat. So .NET Conf is new then?
.NET Conf is actually it depends on where you want to go back in time. So it's actually about 10 years old.
Oh wow!
It is the first virtual conference for Microsoft. We started it in 2010, and it had different names. It had MVC for ASP.NET MVC, which was the first open source thing that came out of Microsoft. Then was rebranded to ASP.Conf for ASP.NET, and then they essentially got rebranded to .NET Conf. So I've been working with the foundation on .NET Conf for the past 5 or 6 years. So they're actually sponsored of the virtual conference.
Very
So,
nice.
but yeah.
So can you tell me a little bit about your background with the .NET
Right.
Foundation?
Right. Like I said, I've known a lot of the board members because I've been an MVP for the past 14 years. So when for the foundation first started, I kind of just sort of stood back and kind of watched what it was going to do outside of just like, hey, an umbrella for projects and so forth. And it wasn't until I started working with the foundation with .NET Conf to say, oh, this is great. Now we can actually partner together, because the goal is essentially for .NET Conf is to make .NET as attractive from the perspective of usability, portability, community base as we can, and showcase all the different projects that we have. So, and that is essentially what the kind of goes hand in hand with the mission of the foundation, by trying to create, again, that hardness or that home for those projects along with the community around it.
Yeah.
So it's been a great partnership throughout several years. We actually have an event coming up next week. Actually, I think that's more of a Microsoft event, but we have a big event, our 10-year anniversary event, coming in the fall. So we're looking forward to that. It's going to be awesome.
Very, very cool. So I think we hit on some, but the next question is, what are your contributions to the .NET Foundation and community?
So let's start with the community perspective, right? Many years ago, before I had kids, I had a lot more free time. So I actually worked on open source projects, right? So I created one project that sort of was popular because it essentially enabled some things that weren't out of the box with .NET. And the name of the project was called MVC Turbine. And essentially what it was, it's a little small component that you can put inside of ASP.NET that allow you to do dependency injection first, do these things with ASP.NET, make it more composable, be able to add services and do X and Y, which was fun because many years ago, around that same time, there was this big work with one ASP.NET. Scott Hanselman blogged about it for many years, which essentially was the foundation for .NET Core. So it was cool to sort of be back and be in the beginning, and we start with a conversation with the product teams and saying, hey, here's why I did this. Here's we're literally at this point where we are all trying to do the same thing. So we're parallel tracks. We just need to come to a head, right? And then be able to enable for this platform. You know, people were saying, oh, .NET is not as attractive as Ruby on Rails back in 2008. Or is not as awesome as Node, or is not as awesome as things. And the reason why that is because it was more of like, well, great, here are the features, it works. What else can we innovate on top of it? Right? So there was some churn in there that had to happen both internally at Microsoft and the community for us to go forward. So it was fun to be part of that part of the community, again, providing an open source project and be able to be a voice for that, which obviously lent to my virtual conference work, which tied to doing more work with the foundation, doing those things. A fun thing that we do as part of the foundation as well, which myself and actually Scott Hanselman, who was working with me at the time still working with .NET Conf, obviously, but it was, we had a lot of different groups across the world saying, hey, we love .NET Conf. Can we borrow the brand? So the .NET Poland, .NET Conf Poland spun out of it, a .NET Conf Japan. We actually, interestingly enough, borrowed the name from a conference in Russia called .NET Conf, but it was like, but they're in person as compared to us being virtual.
Right.
But anyway, but it's just interesting that everybody had the same idea. So it's like great, and it was like at this point is let us provide the platform. Yeah. And the value that it has, and then you guys take and run with it. We have zero say in how you should run it. You just borrow the name, and we're all on the same team here.
So speaking about these experiences that you have,
right,
organizing and running conferences
Right.
and then splitting off. What experiences do you have that will specifically lend a hand to being on the board?
That's great. So I do run my own consulting business, so I know about different operations. I am actually part of current boards, local boards to my hometown, where we have to. We're non for profit, so it's all about taking as much investment as we can in to invest back into the resources that we have. Like, for example, part of a baseball, a little league. So that takes a lot of money to run a baseball park, right? And coaches and whatnot. So I have a lot of experience from that way. And the one thing I've learned from participating on this perspective, it's not about I have the right answer, right? It's about a consensus, right? So I've been on a board of 9 people, I've been on a board of 12 people. And really what it comes down to is more of like, okay, great. What is the goal that we're trying to achieve? I may be on someone's good side or on someone's bad side, depending on my stance.
Right.
But it's essentially is to say, hey, forget what you're trying to push and what is best for the organization, right? You may not agree with it 100%, but you have to step back and be able to say, yeah, this makes sense. This, by doing X, Y, Z, the .NET community will become better. Or we will provide for these things, rather than saying, here's my 7-step plan to better whatever, right? That doesn't stand. It's more of like, and now I have to sit there and be a representative for a greater good.
Very, very nice. So last question, what is your number one focus for the foundation?
My number one focus is to bring more of the of that outsider perspective, right? Just because I've always played a back role on all of the things that I've done for the community. It's more of like, hey, here's what we have, but guess what? There's people out there who are smarter than me, and we should listen to them, right? So I tend to be a voice of reason, because I try to get as much knowledge from different people, trying to figure out, okay, is this the right approach? Is this not the right approach? So I hope to sort of, if elected, to play that similar role, to saying, well, wait a minute, history has taught us to be this, this, and this. And the reason why I say that is I've been a .NET developer since 2001, 2002, since college. I'm old, so that's just the way it is. So I've seen the ups and downs of the community, of everything is that. So as compared to someone who's like, well, I've been doing .NET for 5 years. This is hot. This is great. It's like, great. But you have to understand that there are multiple facets. The community is not just one thing. It's different things. So how can you provide something for one aspect of the community and not alienate the other one, and vice versa?
Wonderful answer. Well, I wish you the best of luck.
Thanks so much.
Thank you so much for coming on to interview, Javier.
Yeah, thank you so much.
All right, thank you.